Snow slashed across the canyon, a blade of white driven by a wind that bit bone-deep. Cole Ward staggered against it, his coat flapping like a torn sail. One hand pressed to his ribs where an old saber wound pulsed with every step. 3 days, without food, for since his horse collapsed under the weight of cold and hunger, his revolver, heavy in its holster, was the only thing grounding him to the earth. He was 34, but his body felt older-scarred, lean, and worn from a war that hadn't let him go, even years after the last shot was fired. His boots crunched through the snow, each step a choice to keep moving, though he wasn't sure why. Behind him lay a town of debts he couldn't pay and faces that haunted him when he closed his eyes. Ahead, the canyon offered nothing but stone and frost, a place to lie down and let winter claim him. He didn't see the dugout until the door creaked open. It wasn't a cabin, not in any familiar sense, just a low cut in the canyon wall, braced with rough planks, half hidden by snow. A figure stepped out, small but unyielding, wrapped in a blanket that whipped around her legs. Her black hair spilled, loose, catching the wind, and her dark eyes locked on him, sharp as flint. Nidita, though he didn't know her name yet, studied him like a hunter sizing up wounded prey. Her first thought was plain: he won't survive the night. Her second, heavier, flickered across her face. Letting him in might end me, too. Still, she spoke, her voice cutting through the storm's howl. Cowboy, we're shivering. Get in. My shelter. Now inside, the door thudded shut, sealing out the wind. The dugout was a cave of shadow and smoke, lit by a small fire in a dirt pit. Shelves hacked into the stone held jars of beans and dried roots. A clothesline sagged with damp cloth, and a pot steamed faintly, filling the air with the sour tang of boiled leather and earth. Cole leaned against the wall, his breath shallow, ribs screaming. He took her in, young, maybe 24. Her face carved with lines no one her age should carry. Her dress was torn at the thigh, the shoulder cloth slipping to reveal sharp collarbones, and skin roughened by cold. Her skirt clung to strong legs, built from months of survival, not grace. Beauty was there, raw and unpolished, but it wasn't what held him. It was her hands, steady, calloused, unafraid as she crouched by the fire and wrung out a rag from steaming water. She pressed the cloth to his eyebrow, where blood had crusted from a fall he didn't remember. He flinched but didn't pull away, his eyes fixed on her fingers. It had been years since anyone touched him without malice. You're bleeding, she said, her English deliberate, shaped with care but firm. It'll stop, he rasped, words sticking in his throat. He wanted to explain why he was here, but the truth was a tangle he couldn't unravel. She handed him a bowl of beans, plain but warm. Eat, then talk. The beans hit his stomach like a mercy, and he ate slowly, ashamed of the hunger clawing at him. Nidita watched from across the fire, her own bowl in hand, her eyes measuring him. She'd been alone here for months, cast out by her Apache people, for speaking against bloodshed, for giving food to a starving trader. To them, she was a traitor, a woman who softened their strength. She'd survived on stolen beans, trapped rabbits, and a will that refused to break. But seeing Cole trembling, his scarred jaw, tight with pain, she'd acted before thinking. Now, with him inside her shelter, she wondered if she'd invited death in with him. A white man here could draw patrols, her own people, or worse. Yet his exhaustion, the way his hand shook on the spoon, stirred something in her. She couldn't leave him to die in the snow. Cole felt her gaze, heavy as the revolver at his hip. He knew she was weighing the risk of him, just as he was weighing her. Could she turn him over to save herself? Could he trust her not to? The silence between them wasn't easy, but it wasn't empty. It was a thread, fragile but forming, pulling them towards something neither could name. Morning light sliced through a crack above the door, pale and sharp. Cole woke to the ache in his ribs and the smell of coffee, bitter and strong. Nidita knelt by the fire, her hair loose down her back, the blanket slipping from her shoulders as she poured boiling water into a tin cup. The dugout was more than he'd first thought, not just a hole, but a place shaped by care. The fire ring was precise, smoke curling through a vent in the roof. Shelves were smoothed to hold jars. The floor swept clean near her sleeping mat. Survival, not chance, had built this. He shifted, wincing, and she turned at the sound, handing him the cup. Coffee, strong. He nodded, the heat biting his palms. You've been here long, he said, voice rough with sleep. Since the first snow, she answered, eyes on the fire. 4 moons. I don't count days. For months, alone, hunted by her own people, living on what she could steal or trap. The weight of it settled in his chest. He wanted to ask why she'd been cast out, but her shoulders, sharp and tense, stopped him. He knew, exiled to his farm in Missouri, burned, his wife, buried, his life, scattered like ash. Dita broke the silence. Why are you here, cowboy? This canyon's far from your towns. He stared into the coffee, then at his boots against the wall. Left with nothing worth keeping. No work, no horse, just kept walking. He paused, the words sounding hollow. Fought in the war. When it ended, there was no place for me. Been drifting since. Her eyes narrowed, seeing more than he said. The scar on his ribs, the limp in his step. The lines around his eyes, they told a story his words didn't. He wasn't just drifting, he was running. You live out here alone, he said, shifting the weight of her stare. What keeps you safe? Her expression hardened. I keep low. Watch the rim. Know where to hide. My people. She stopped, choosing her words. They don't forgive me. If they see me, they'll finish what they started. He nodded, not pressing. She'd built this place, not just found it. Your father knew of it, she added. Traitors dug here once. When they left, I took it. It's not a home, just a place to not die. The words hit him harder than he expected. He knew that kind of place where survival was the only thing left. The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It was the kind where 2 people wait, watching each other for the next move. They worked through the morning, hauling water from the creek. Her clay jug balanced on her hip, her steps sure despite the ice. Cole followed, scanning the rim as she did, his hand brushing her elbow when she slipped. Her eyes met his, softer for a moment, before she turned back to the task. The air between them had shifted, cautious but threaded with something new. That night, she pushed the larger bowl of beans toward him, and when he slid half back, her lips twitched, not a smile, but close. The silence wasn't suspicion anymore. It was trust, rough and unspoken. The 4th morning brought a colder wind, the dugout creaking under fresh snow. Cole noticed a crack in the roof seam, air slipping through. As he patched it with clay, he asked, how long can this place hold if the snow keeps pushing? Nedita, braiding her hair, looked up. Long enough. Traitors dug it strong. I mend it after every storm. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked to the door. And your people, he pressed. Do they come this way? Her jaw tensed. Sometimes scouts. They check for signs. He stepped outside to gather wood, and that's when he saw them, 3 silhouettes on the rim, riders against the sky. They lingered, watching, then vanished behind the canyon wall. He carried the wood inside, his face tight. Nedita knew before he spoke. She barred the door, then knelt by the sleeping mat, pulling a flat stone aside to reveal a hollow. A small bow, arrows, and a carved charm lay inside. She pressed the charm to her lips, then returned it. Cole's hand rested on his revolver, but he wrapped it in cloth and tucked it away. If they come, I'll stay out of sight, he said. She nodded, but her voice was thin. If they find you, they won't spare me. Dusk fell, and the tension held. Nedita ground beans into meal, her hands steady but her eyes darting to the door. Cole watched her, the firelight catching the curve of her collarbone where her torn dress slipped. She caught him looking and held his gaze, longer than before. When they settled for the night, she lay closer, her back to him, tense but near. He listened to the wind and thought of the riders. How had she survived for months like this? Always half awake, always waiting. The answer was in her hands, her traps, her steady steps. Work, watch, endure. The 5th morning broke with heavy snow, the dugout half buried. Cole and Nedita worked to clear the door, their breaths clouding in the sharp air. She stopped suddenly, staring at him. Why stay? You saw the riders. You know the risk. He leaned on the axe, catching his breath. I've run too long. No camp, no home. If I leave, it's back to nothing. Her eyes searched his, steady and unyielding. And if they kill me for hiding you, I'll answer for myself, he said. Not you. She didn't reply, but her silence wasn't rejection. Later, as she mended her dress with a needle, from a leather pouch he asked, what do you do when you're alone? When there's no work? She paused, surprised. I watch. I think. Sometimes I sing, quiet, so no one hears. Sometimes I talk to myself. He nodded. Loneliness was worse than hunger. That night, she sat closer, her shoulder brushing his waned. When she leaned against him, her weight light but grounding, he felt something shift. She whispered, "If they come back, we must be ready." He turned to her, the firelight on her face. "We will be." The storm eased by the 7th day, but the canyon stayed silent, too silent. Cole woke to the sound of hooves, closer now, deliberate. 5 riders, not 3, their voices sharp with purpose. Nidita's face tightened. "Stay behind the shelf," she said, her voice low but firm. "If they find you, we're done." He wanted to argue, but her eyes stopped him. He slid into the crawl space, knife in his boot, revolver hidden, every muscle coiled. She opened the door, standing tall as the riders dismounted. Their voices were harsh, accusing, demanding to search. One pointed at the woodpile, calling it too fresh. Nidita met their eyes. "This is my shelter. I built it. Look, but you'll find nothing." They pushed inside, boots heavy, one tugging. At the curtain near Cole's hiding place, his heart pounded, but another rider called him away, dismissing the dugout as empty. The youngest lingered, his eyes on Nidita, his words laced with threat. "Why do you survive when others don't?" She lifted her chin. "Because I'm stronger than you think." They left hooves fading into the snow. Cole emerged, finding Nidita against the door, trembling but fierce. He touched her arm, and she looked at him, eyes wet. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until they're sure I'm nothing." He shook his head. "You're not nothing, and you're not alone." That night, they didn't wait for the riders to return. Nidita showed him a seam in the back wall, soft earth where they could dig. With a dull knife and a chisel head, they carved a narrow tunnel to a ledge above, braced with willow poles and packed with clay. It was an escape, a way out if the door became a trap. They stacked wood outside as a barrier, gathered stones for defense. Nidita's hands bled, but she worked without pause, her father's lessons guiding her. A home must have more than one way out. By dusk they sat by the fire, exhausted but steady. Nidita's braid had loosened, her dress slipping at the neck. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "You could leave," she said, no challenge in her voice. "I've had enough of leaving," he replied. "Not this time." She stayed there, her breath evening out, and he knew the dugout was no longer just hers. It was theirs. The thaw came slowly, snow melting into streams that carved the canyon floor. They worked together, clearing the door, checking the tunnel, sharing tasks like they'd been doing it for years, but the riders' tracks lingered in their minds. At midday hooves sounded again, closer, searching. Nidita pulled Cole behind the shelf. "If they find you, we're done," she whispered. He nodded, knife ready, revolver hidden. She opened the door, facing 5 men. Their leader demanded answers, his hand on his knife, claiming the canyon as theirs. Nidita stood firm. "This is my place. You'll find nothing." They searched, tearing at shelves, kicking the fire. Cole watched, his breath shallow, as one nearly found the crawl space. But they left, convinced by her defiance, her strength. When they were gone, Cole held her, her body shaking against his. "They'll come again," she said. "Then we'll be ready," he answered. "Both of us." She looked at him, fierce and certain, and nodded. That night, they planned a future planting by the creek, carving a new shelf, building a life. They lay together, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. The dugout was no longer a hiding place. It was a home, forged in exile, bound by choice, and neither would face the canyon alone again. The meltwater trickled down the canyon walls in thin rivulets, carving paths through the lingering snow and turning the ground to a slick mud that clung to boots like regret. Cole stood at the dugout door, axe in hand, his ribs still tender but no longer a constant fire. The air carried the sharp bite of thawing earth, mixed with the faint rot of wet stone. Nidita emerged behind him, her hair tied back with a strip of hide. The jug balanced on her hip as she scanned the rim always the rim, where threats could crest like sudden waves. 2 weeks had passed since the last riders, but the canyon's quiet felt false, a held breath before a storm. They moved together now, not as strangers sharing space, but as 2 people, bound by the rhythm of survival, wood chopped, water hauled, traps checked. Each task wove them closer, a silent acknowledgement that neither had to face the cold alone. Cole swung the axe into a juniper stump, the impact jarring his arms, sending splinters flying. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill, and he paused to wipe it away with his sleeve. Nidita watched from the creek's edge, her skirt hitched up to her knees as she broke through the thinning ice. Her legs, strong and scarred from thorns and rocks, flexed with each strike. She filled the jug, the water gurgling cold and clear, then straightened, her eyes meeting his across the distance. No words passed, but the look held weight, a shared understanding forged in the nights they'd lain side by side, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. It wasn't love, not yet. It was respect, earned in the grit of mending walls and splitting wood, in the way he'd steadied her when she slipped, or how she'd pressed a warm rag to his scars without pity. They ate that midday under a pale sun, beans mixed with rabbit meat she'd trapped the day before. The fire crackled low, smoke curling up through the vent, filling the dugout with a woody tang. Cole passed her the larger share without thinking, and she took it this time, her fingers brushing his. "You're healing," she said, her voice soft but direct, nodding to his side where the saber cut had finally scabbed over. He grunted, chewing slowly. "Because of you." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, the lines around them easing. In the silence that followed, he felt the pull of her story, the parts she'd held back. "Tell me about your father," he said finally, setting his bowl down. "The one who taught you about places like this." Nidita stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in her dark eyes. Her hands, rough from work, clenched briefly. "He was a scout, strong but quiet. He said words waste breath when eyes can see." She paused, the memory pulling at her like an old wound. "He showed me how to dig shelters, set traps, but he followed the raids. When I spoke against them, gave food to a trader dying in the snow, they called me weak. He didn't stop them from tying me to the post." Her voice stayed even, but her shoulders tensed, the blanket slipping to reveal the faint scars on her arms from that day. Cole nodded, recognizing the betrayal in her words. He'd known it, too, in the war, who'd turned on him for refusing an order that meant slaughtering civilians. "I left a farm burning behind me," he admitted, his voice low. "Wife's gone to fever before the fighting even reached us. War took the rest. Drifted since, thinking solitude was safer." She met his gaze then, steady. "Solitude kills slow." The words hung between them, a bridge built from shared scars. That afternoon, they reinforced the tunnel, packing more clay into the sides, their hands caked in mud. Cole's fingers brushed hers as they worked, and she didn't pull away. The closeness felt natural now, born of necessity, her strength complementing his, her knowledge of the land filling the gaps in his. When evening fell, they lay together, the fire's glow painting her face in warm shadows, her body pressed against his, warm and solid, her breath sinking with the wind outside. No rush, no demands, just the quiet certainty that they were stronger together. But the canyon's peace shattered at dawn the next day. Cole woke to the distant thud of hooves, not the casual rhythm of scouts, but deliberate, multiple. He rose quickly, revolver in hand, peering through the door. Crack. 6 riders crested the rim, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. They weren't Apache this time, white men, coats flapping, rifles slung across their backs. Patrols, maybe, or bounty hunters drawn by rumors of a lone woman harboring drifters. Nidita stirred behind him, her hand on his arm. "Not my people," she whispered, her voice tight. Worse, they barred the door, slipping into the crawl space, hearts pounding in the dim light. The riders approached, voices carrying on the windruff, commanding. "Heard there's a squad down here, hiding out. Might have supplies we need." The leader's tone dripped ownership, as if the canyon were his to claim. Cole's jaw clenched. He'd heard that voice before, in towns where men took what they wanted without asking. The men dismounted outside, boots crunching mud. One pounded on the door, the wood shuddering. "Open up, we know you're in there." Nidita's breath quickened beside him, her bow strung, arrow nocked. Cole gripped his revolver, finger on the trigger. The leader laughed, low and mocking. "Come on, girl, we ain't here to hurt you much. Just want what's ours." His words slithered through the cracks, a claim on her body, her shelter, her life. Cole felt rage boil, but Nidita's hand on his wrist stopped him silent, firm. Action now meant death. They waited, sweat beading despite the cold, as the men circled the dugout, kicking at the woodpile, testing the walls. One probed the roof seam, grunting. "Place is solid. She must be holed up good." Minutes stretched like hours, the scent of horse sweat and tobacco seeping in. Finally, the leader spat. "Burn her out if she don't show." Cole tensed, but Nidita shook her head. The men argued, then mounted up, voices fading as they rode off. "We'll be back. This canyon's ours now." They emerged shaking, the air thick with tension. Nidita leaned against the wall, her face pale, eyes fierce. "They claim everything," she said, voice bitter. "Land, people." Cole holstered his gun, his hands steady but his mind racing. The patrol's threat stirred old doubts, his past as a soldier, the blood on his hands. What if staying meant bringing more violence to her door? "I could draw them away," he offered, the words tasting like ash. She turned sharply. "And leave me to face them alone." No. Her strength, fragile yet unyielding, pulled him back. They spent the day fortifying, sharpening arrows, oiling his revolver, stacking more stones. In the work, their bond deepened, a quiet defiance against the world's harshness. Nights grew restless after that. Cole lay awake, listening to the wind howl like distant gunfire, his arm around Nidita. She shifted closer, her body warm against his, but her sleep was fitful, haunted by memories of exile. One night, as the fire died, she whispered, "I fear they'll take this tooth a little we have." He held her tighter, his thumb tracing the scar on her arm. "Not while I'm here." But inside, conflict gnawed. His war scars reminded him he was no savior, just a broken man. Could he protect her, or would he fail again, like with his wife? The Kenyans' cruelty amplified their struggles. A sudden rain turned the ground to slurry, flooding the creek and washing away traps. They waded through knee-deep water, mud sucking at their legs, to reset them. Nidita slipped once, her dress soaking through, clinging to her curves, revealing the vulnerability beneath her strength. Cole pulled her up, his hands on her waist, steady and gentle. "Got you," he murmured. She nodded, breath ragged, but in her eyes, gratitude mixed with fear, not of the water, but of depending on him. That evening, as they dried by the fire, she mended his coat, her fingers precise. "You could go south, find work," she said, testing him. He shook his head. "Not without you." The admission hung heavy, rooted in the trials they'd shared, the cold nights, the riders' threats, the endless work. External dangers mounted. Scouts from her people returned midweek, 3 riders spotting fresh tracks near the creek. They circled the dugout, voices sharp in Apache, accusing her of betrayal anew. Nidita faced them alone, bow hidden, her stance defiant. "I survive as I must," she told them, her words clipped. The leader sneered, his hand on his knife, claiming her as a disgrace to their blood. "We'll drag you back, make an example." Cole watched from the tunnel, heart hammering, contrasting their cruelty with his silent vow to shield her. They left, but promised return. Nidita collapsed inside, trembling. "They see weakness in mercy," she said. Cole knelt beside her, his touch light. "Mercy saved me." In that moment, their connection solidified, not passion, but a forged alliance against the border's brutality. Internal storms brewed too. Cole's nightmares returned. Battlefields, screams, the saber slicing his side. He woke sweating, Nidita's hand on his chest calming him. "What haunts you?" she asked one dawn, as mist rose from the canyon floor. He confessed fragments, the orders he'd defied, the friends lost. "I wonder if I'm worth the risk you take." She cupped his face, her palms rough. "We all carry ghosts. But you stay. That's enough." Her own doubts surfaced, fear of trusting a white man, echoes of traders who'd promised peace, then betrayed. "What if you leave when spring comes?" He met her gaze. "I won't." The words, simple, bridged their inner chasms. The border's harshness tested them further. A coyote pack raided their traps, leaving them hungry. They hunted together, Nidita's bow silent and true, Cole's revolver as backup. In the chase, through thorny brush that tore its skin, they cornered a rabbit. As she skinned it, blood on her hands, she glanced at him. "This land takes, but we take back." Their meals grew meager, bodies leaner, but in the hunger, they leaned on each other, sharing warmth, stories, touches that lingered. Climax built when the white patrol returned at week's end, torches lit, intent on burning. Cole and Nidita fled through the tunnel, hearts pounding, mud slick underfoot. From the ledge, they watched flames lick the dugout door. The leader laughed. "Run, squaw, but we'll find you." Rage surged in Cole, but Nidita pulled him away, into the shadows. They camped rough that night, under stars sharp as knives, her body pressed to his foreheat. "We rebuild," she whispered. He nodded, their bond unbreakable now, tempered in loss. They returned at dawn, salvaging what remained charred wood, scattered jars as they rebuilt, stone by stone, their hands intertwined in the work. The canyon's cruelty had forged something enduring, not just survival, but a partnership defying the world's divisions. Riders might come again, ghosts linger, but together they stood unbowed,